Welcome, Marco.
Thank you, Emily. Good
well,
to be
this
here.
is daunting, isn't it, on a day-to-day
Yeah.
basis?
It's a massive beat. 25,000 miles around the world, and how many countries? 200 plus. So, yeah, we focus on a lot of them, and it's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it.
We should also make it clear that you're just not tailoring this to a local audience here in Boston. It's all around the country because it's a national program. So when something like the Nairobi mall shooting happens, how do you decide? I mean, you ended up doing it here in Boston. You're going to talk about that in a minute. But how do you decide where's the best place to focus something?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, we came in on Monday morning, and the story was still happening in Nairobi, and it was big, and there are connections to the United States. It was kind of a no-brainer to lead with that story on Monday, and we've been covering it pretty much every day since. As people know, last Saturday, militants went into the shopping mall, the Westgate shopping center in Nairobi, complete surprise attack, complete panic and mayhem, and the police forces went in. Over 60 people have died. It was still going on Monday. On Tuesday, it finally ended, I believe, on Wednesday. It's kind of hard to remember now. But it was a terrible scene. Over 60 people killed, as I said, and they're still counting in the rubble. But they say no more survivors.
No, but you ended up doing the story locally.
We decided that one of the most fascinating things, and I actually grew up in North Carolina, not far from an Eastgate shopping mall, that we have these shopping centers in our lives, that they're a part of our lives, and that there was this real kind of way of connecting to the story through the whole idea of a shopping center. Like, how could this possibly happen? So one of our reporters, Nina Porzuki, went out to the Prudential Mall to find out, like, what is the role of shopping centers, of malls in our lives. And as we discovered, it developed out of urban flight, people looking for security. And so you find this kind of interesting mirror between what's happening here at a place like the Prudential Center in Boston, or any of the shopping malls outside of the city is probably a better metaphor, and why people go to shopping centers like the Westgate Mall in Kenya. It's for security. I mean, a lot of the foreigners and the elite Kenyans who are trying to be upwardly mobile, they do not want to shop in the African marketplace necessarily, so they go to these shopping centers. We thought it was a good way of getting into the story.
And you have a little bit of sound with somebody that you spoke to? Who was that?
We spoke with a woman who was actually minding a yogurt stand at the Prudential Center, and she brings in some really relevant points about for Bostonians especially, this event kind of brought them back to that state of unease back in April at the Boston Marathon.
Ever since the bombing in Boston, any sudden movement or sound, everyone's kind of oh, it puts people on edge, but I think you can't stop doing everyday things just because of things that happen. You just keep going. It's scary. A place that you feel like you could take your family, and then just thinking about it, it's sad. It really is.
Of course, the Prudential Center was profoundly affected during the marathon bombings as well, so it's a natural place to go do that. Yeah. We were talking to people locally. One of our producers said she was walking around the Burlington Mall on Friday night, looking for places to hide. So this is...
Yeah, it fills... I mean, anybody naturally with, these second thoughts about, do I go to a shopping mall now? I mean, and of course the people will say, well, don't change your life because then the terrorists have won. But it does make you think twice.
Now, an extension of this was who these guys were.
Right.
These Somali terrorists. And I was unaware of this, but one of your reporters discovered that many of these Somali teenagers come here to the United States, they get educated, they get assimilated here, but they end up going back for various reasons to Somalia, and then they become part of these terror groups. And one of your reporters found some people in Minnesota who had direct involvement in this.
Right. We actually spoke with a woman, a young Somali American, 28 years old, who there's a pretty substantial Somali community in the Twin Cities area, Minneapolis, St. Paul. Zuhur Ahmed is her name, and she used to host a radio program for young Somali Americans in this country. And she remembered having a guest on who later, she realized, had been recruited by al-Shabaab, had gone to Mogadishu, and had died in a suicide bombing. So it's a pretty extraordinary story, and she knows intimately, what kind of identity crises these young people go through, how some of them sort of then become more susceptible and are recruited. And the FBI is watching the Twin Cities pretty carefully.
Let's hear that.
I interviewed them in my radio show, I think a few months before he left to Somalia. In that interview, and I kind of go back and listen to it, and I just hear him echo how much lost he was, and kind of really breaks my heart just to know that, and he's dead now, but just to know that so many young lives are lost to gangs and to terrorist groups just because they're lost and they don't have great role models, or a terror group that's saying, come, we'll give you a home, we'll accept you.
That is really a frightening story.
Yeah, it is a frightening story. And then you think about, like, right there, in Minnesota, the Mall of America, which is a huge mall. And we've been hearing that people are worried about going there, so.
Yeah. All right, another big story covering this week. President of Iran is here, and he's saying Westerners are getting nervous because he seems to be saying the right things about acknowledging the Holocaust and saying, yeah, we got to make an nuclear arms deal. People are slapping their foreheads and going, really?
Yeah, it's a wild time. I mean, as we said today on the program, like last week, the U.S. and Iran were still kind of not talking to each other, and suddenly it's on the fast track. And President Hassan Rouhani says, today, between 3 and 6 months, we can have a deal. I mean, it's just, it's filled with optimism. We spoke with Gary Sick today, who was the point person at the White House under Carter in 1979 during the hostage crisis. He said, this is totally different. This is a new day. Obviously, there are a lot of moving pieces, but, this afternoon, John Kerry and the foreign minister of Iran met, so things are moving ahead. It's pretty amazing.
And you have some sound with somebody you spoke to?
From The Guardian, yes.
Well, I think after 8 years of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, after 8 acrimonious years under Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, I think Rouhani is trying to revamp the image of Iran on the world stage and show another face of Iran.
He did say, Hassan Rouhani said about the Nazis, whatever criminality they committed against the Jews, we condemn. What have been reactions to his comments on that? What have you heard from Iran?
I personally think that he's accepted Holocaust. I don't think we should read too much out of his lines. I think he said very clearly that he did the criminality of the Nazis against the Jews, whatever it is, he condemns it. He's almost saying that whatever name you want to call it, I condemn it.
All right, Marco Werman is still here. We're going to broaden the discussion to provide some more perspective. Ali Banwazi is an Iranian-American and a political science professor at Boston College. So is this the real deal, or should we be suspicious with Rouhani?
It's the beginning of a real deal. I think as we speak, at the level of foreign ministers, the 5+1 group is meeting with the foreign minister of Iran. And obviously this represents an elevation of the level of conversation and negotiations between Iran and the U.S. And as we heard, Rouhani has indicated that he hopes that there would be some kind of agreement over the next 3 to 6 months. But we must realize that whereas he's trying to play a very moderate role, and I believe he has been given the authority to negotiate by the supreme leader of Iran, Khamenei, there are powerful forces in the country that are opposed to this reconciliation and this opening to the West.
You have family
he's being
there.
Very cautious about this.
You have family still in Iran.
What
are they thinking?
Don't, some distant relatives, but no immediate family in Iran.
Yeah. So, but what is it like for Iranians? Are they wanting this because it's complicated with Israel and the rest of the Middle East? Or are they also wary about forging this kind of détente is a strong word, but relationship?
Not at all. I think if we're focusing on the Iranians inside the country, they clearly would like to see a change. The vote that Rouhani received in the election last year was a very good indication of that, because he talked about normalizing Iran's relationship with the rest of the world. And he was the unlikely candidate in that race, and he won on that platform, not only on that platform, but also on some domestic issues. So there's no question that the population now living under these incredibly, powerful sanctions, the sanction regime, which is really quite unprecedented in the history of sanctions, international sanctions, is having a very hard time. The economy has been in a very perilous state. Oil revenues going down from $110 billion to something under $50 billion. So all of these factors have contributed to a great desire, I believe, on the part of the population to want to see change, to want to see Iran come out of isolation. And this is what Rouhani has taken on.
It's hard not to get a little bit cynical because, as you know, he's traveling with an Israeli ambassador, and and you're thinking, well, he's already said, he believes the Holocaust was real and it was a horrible thing. Who's he trying to appeal to in this, Rouhani?
Well, it's a PR campaign, I mean, as you pointed out, but I'll go back to what Gary Sick said on our program today, which is, look at what's happening, look at what's being said. Sick was at Rouhani's hotel room last night where there were a bunch of players all asking him questions, very serious questions, and he was taking them on board with very serious answers. He's a very smart man, said Sick, and it's a stark contrast with the way he used to go into meetings with Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who was very confrontational and really wanted to get into fisticuffs and had all his talking points all set and wasn't willing to negotiate. Again, I go back to what Sick said. This is a different moment.
What do you got tomorrow, Marco?
Well, we'll stay on the Iran story. Very curious to see what comes out of the meeting this afternoon between Kerry and Jawad Zarif, Iran's foreign minister. And I'm also really looking forward to an interview with British folk legend Billy Bragg, who was at the Americana Folk Music Awards last week in Nashville, and will make the argument why Americana was invented by Great Britain.
All right,
That's
Marco Werman,
tomorrow.
Ali Banawazi, thank you so much for coming.